In my opinion, so far, we covered the most common methods of discovering path or directory traversal vulnerabilities and bypass insecurity. And as I mentioned, you might have to combine a number of the techniques covered earlier in order to bypass security and discover such bugs. I've also mentioned that I included a cheat sheet that contains a large number of payloads that you could use, again, to bypass and discover these vulnerabilities or bugs. And that might actually make you think that pen testing is very boring, because if you really are serious about discovering bugs and discovering vulnerabilities, you're actually gonna have to do a lot of trial and error and send stuff like this over and over again in order to discover bugs in your target. But luckily, there are tools out there that can make this process more enjoyable so that you can focus on the fun part, which is discovering or spotting the weaknesses, and then letting these tools automatically send all of these requests for us while we relax and maybe have a cup of coffee. So let me show you how to do that. So right here, I have the exact same example that we had in the previous lecture, where we had to double encode the input in order to exploit it and discover the path traversal. I'm going to turn on the interceptor, I'm going to send a request, and I'm going to bypass this one. And we know this is the vulnerable one. We even exploited it. That's why I'm not really doing any tests. So we're going to send it to the repeater, and in the repeater, we would send the normal test. You'll notice that it loads and you get a picture. And then as we did before, you would want to load another picture on the server. So I'm just going to put 31, and I'm lucky. As you can see, I managed to load another picture. And because of that, you're going to use your own experience and your own human intelligence to decide that this request might be vulnerable, this input might be vulnerable, and therefore you want to spend more time on it. So we're not really using an automated tool that just tries everything, because a lot of the time these tools are not good in my opinion. They show a lot of false positives, and even the ones that say that they rely on AI, they're not even close to being as good as an actual human pen tester or bug hunter. So we're relying on what we are good at, which is spotting weaknesses and spotting differences when the website loads. We're relying on our experience in analyzing the endpoints and the inputs to spot a weak request or a weak input or a possibly vulnerable input. And once we're at this stage, we could automate the task of sending all of these payloads in the cheat sheet using the intruder functionality of Burp Suite. And this is actually very, very useful in so many scenarios, not only with these kind of bugs, because the intruder allows you to manually define which parts of the request you want to test. So again, we're relying on our ability as humans to discover the weak spots, and then it'll do the repetitive, boring job of simply sending all of these requests in the point that we think is weak. So, based on our human intelligence, we think that this endpoint might be vulnerable using this input. Therefore, we're going to right click and send it to the intruder. And in the intruder, we're first of all in the positions tab, we're going to have to tell Burp, because again, we're assuming computers are dumb. They don't know what to do. So we need to tell them what to test. So we need to tell Burp in the positions location what to test in this request. So I'm going to clear the S signs, because these S signs specify what to test in the request. And then, because we think this is the vulnerable input, we're going to highlight it and we're going to click on Add S signs. So basically we're telling Burp to test this input right here. Again, we're assuming computers are dumb. Therefore, we're going to have to tell Burp what to test it for, what to put after the equal sign in here. And we can do that using the payloads tab in here. And we're actually gonna keep everything in here the same. We're actually gonna show you more examples of how to do more sophisticated attacks with the intruder, because it's a very, very cool tool that can be used in so many scenarios. But right now we're keeping it simple. And basically what we want to do is to send all of these requests in my cheat sheet as input in here after the file name. So Burp already knows that this is the weak and vulnerable input, and in the payloads, we're simply gonna copy all of the payloads that I have in here, and I'm gonna paste them in here. So now Burp is basically gonna go through all of these payloads. It's gonna send a total of 180 requests, because for each one of these payloads, it's actually gonna send the request. It's gonna paste it in here after the equal sign and then send the request. So without this tool, you would have to send 180 requests manually. But right now, we're automating the boring part and we're getting a machine or a computer to do it for us. So all I have to do is click on Start Attack and it'll send all of these requests for me while I sit down and relax. And once it's done sending these requests, I can easily know which ones worked or which ones were positive by looking at the status. So we can see the request that was sent with no payload gave us a 200, so it gave us a positive response. Everything else gave us 100 in here, but I can actually sort it based on the status. And as you can see, I have two payloads in here that actually worked. If I click on the first one in here, you can see the actual payload that was sent. So you can see there is a lot of double encoding happening in here, and it's looking for etc password. And if I click on the response, I will see that etc password was actually loaded. So I didn't have to do any manual testing with this. All I had to do is just spot a possibly weak parameter or input, and then I got Burp to do all of the boring work for me. This is really where tools like Burp shine, because in my opinion, this way we can use the best of both worlds. So we're using human intelligence in order to spot the weak points, and then we're using a machine to run the boring task of repetitively sending a large number of payloads until one of them gives us a positive response. So it's more of a hybrid approach to pen testing instead of simply relying on fully manual hacking, which can be quite boring if you're gonna manually send every single one of these requests, or if you are relying on a computer to simply just send a lot of requests without even analyzing or understanding what's happening in the background. Also, the intruder is actually very, very useful because, as you can see, it's pretty much a brute forcing tool. So you can even use it to brute force passwords. You can basically modify this request any way you want and edit it any way you want, add these signs wherever you want, and you can set any payloads you want in here. Click on Start Attack and it'll do everything for you automatically. Also, if you have the Pro version, you don't even need to use a cheat sheet. So I'm going to clear this. In the Pro version of Burp, you can simply load a preloaded payload list. So in here, in the fuzzing, in the path traversal, if I click on that, you can see it'll automatically fill it with a large number. It's actually much bigger than the cheat sheet that I have, 2,200 of possible path traversal payloads. Again, all you have to do is click on Start Attack and it'll start the attack for you. But as you saw earlier, you don't really have to have the Pro. You can simply use your own cheat sheet or the cheat sheet that I have right now, and you'll be able to use the intruder pretty much just as good as the Pro. It'll just be a little bit slower.